our first podcast. This is Scott Conkright here with the Meaningful Happiness podcast with my friend Dustin here to join me. Appreciate that.
Hey, great
Welcome,
to see you.
Dustin.
Yeah.
I was saying that before I hit the record button, which I found out is very important when you're recording a podcast, that this is my first podcast, and we're learning some things. I was saying that this is technically the second podcast because we just did the first podcast, but I failed to hit the record button, which makes a difference. So we're at it again.
We had a nice friendly conversation, and it was time well spent.
It was like our usual fun conversation. It just is not recorded. It is now. And we're actually 56 seconds into it.
Very nice.
So good. It's working.
Yes.
It's working. So, and I named it too. I called it the Meaningful Happiness Podcast 1, Dustin and Shame.
Oh. Okay.
So I thought you would like that. I thought those two things went well together, Dustin and Shame.
As a Florida man who has very little shame, I feel like that's an appropriate moniker. I like it.
So I'm going to have you talk a lot about your shame and lack thereof, you shameless person. But sorry to put those two names together, Shame and Dustin. I just need it for the title.
Sure.
For today. But yeah, I wanted to talk about shame in general because that's what really interests me right now. It's, as a psychologist, I'm finding that affect, which many people don't know about, including psychologists, affect theory is really one of those topics that has been left out of mental health in any direct sort of way. I mean, it's been left out directly, but it's not been included in any training for most therapists. Whereas it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's the affects, and affects are the biological basis of emotions. And I'll go into more detail about that later. But the affect that I'm really wanting to talk about today is shame, as I mentioned, and how it's prevalent in how we think, how we feel, how we live our lives, what motivates us to do things, and what also keeps us from doing so many things. And so I don't know anybody who can't talk about shame in their life. Matter of fact, one of the interesting things that's happening is that I have my friends come over and they ask me what I'm doing, and they see all my equipment around, and they say I'm doing podcasts and videos on shame. The next thing I know, they're telling me all the shameful things that they've never shared with anybody before.
Yeah. And
I'm not charging them either. You know, like I should take a credit card.
Sure.
They're getting free therapy.
Yeah.
But so, like, what comes to mind when I mention shame for you? I mean, I'm not asking you to air out your dirty laundry here. I'm
Sure.
just saying, what is there? We generally have a response to even the word shame,
Right.
Like hide, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me in particular, and for a lot of people, feelings of shame are, potentially one of the largest impediments to happiness. So obviously some sources of shame are fine and good. But generally speaking, a life led in shame avoidance primarily is probably not a very fulfilled and happy life. So I think it's an important thing to recognize.
Yeah, I think we all would say that, except we tend not to know what shame is, except in the extreme form. Humiliation, embarrassment come to mind. I'm trying to think of the other synonyms at the extreme end. The mortifying experiences. We're like, oh my God, I can't face myself or anybody else because I just did something horrible or really embarrassing, especially in a public way.
Sure.
So that public shaming is what a lot of people go to. A lot of people don't realize that having hurt feelings is on the mild end of shame.
And do you think that's in the sense that I shouldn't feel this way, and so I'm ashamed of the way that I feel because my feelings are hurt because I'm weak in some way? Is that what you mean?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that allows me to explain at least my definition of shame,
Sure. Yeah.
which comes from Silvan Tompkins, the father of affect theory. So the way he describes shame, for one, again, shame is one of the affects, one of the 9 affects that are biological basis of emotions. It's from those biological responses that we get emotions, and I'll go into that later. But for right now, think of shame as an involuntary reaction to disconnection in a relationship, but it's only partial. Okay, because if somebody, for instance, if some jerk that I don't like and don't agree with and have had conflict with calls me a jerk, calls me a name or does something like that, I don't care. I don't. It doesn't. I'm not upset about my quote disconnection from him or his assessment of me. Okay, I have to want connection with that person for it to be shame.
Mm.
I I have to have an interest in something or in somebody, an investment in that person or in that endeavor for shame to happen. Because what's happening in shame is it's only a partial reduction in the connection. Okay. So let's say here's one way that shame works that a lot of people don't think about it, don't think of it as shame. If you're working on a problem, let's say you're trying to build an IKEA bookcase. I forget, they're famous. There's millions of them out there. I'm sure you put together an IKEA bookcase at some point in your life. Okay? They're normally pretty easy, but sometimes they don't come with the right parts and all that. And you're working at it and you're working at it. It's now 10:30. You're ready to go to bed, and you just about finished, and it won't work. So what do? You get the slump of shame. Oh man, you know, you can't figure this problem out. You can't do this. You can't accomplish that.
Mm.
You want to have that connection. You want the good feelings of what accomplishment would give you, but you can't get there.
Mm.
Okay. So when a friend calls up, if I were to say, hey, let's go for dinner, and then at 7:30 I call you and say, hey, listen, I can't make it. Let's reschedule. You're gonna go like, oh man, bummer. I hope you would. I mean, I hope it would be somewhat disappointing if if I said, let's
what a
go for
relief!
dinner.
That was going to be a terrible 2 hours.
That's not what now I'm ashamed. Like, jeez,
Dodged a bullet there. Yeah.
What? I am so happy now. But in most cases, I would hope that there would be this, disappointment. So disappointment is a form of mild shame.
Mm.
Okay. So in a relationship, if you and Kim were supposed to go do something and she says, I have a headache or whatever, and I can't do X, Y, or Z, and you had big hopes for that taking place, that would be a shame response, because an easy place especially in an intimate relationship to go to when there's hurt feelings or disappointment is, oh, they don't want to be with me.
Mm.
They're canceling because they don't want to have dinner with me. They don't want to do X, Y, or Z.
Interesting. Yeah, I would not have connected disappointment with shame initially. I would have thought those were two disparate feelings.
So what I'm hoping by having a podcast like this and talking about shame on a regular basis is that there's more familiarity with the concept, and also especially the idea that it's on a continuum, that it's not just the big side. It's not just embarrassment and humiliation. That it's small things that disconnect you from the other person. I know in the podcast that doesn't exist from an hour ago that didn't get recorded, shamefully, I remember bringing up the example of the infant trying to reach a toy when it's lying on its back and it's trying to reach a toy, and it can't reach it. I mean, it's cooing and going whatever babies do with delight, trying to reach it, and at some point gives up, and it slumps down. It does a slump of shame. That's a shame response. Okay, you tend to, with shame and disappointment, is you tend to shrug your shoulders and then kind of slump over. It's like, oh man, bummer. So
it's amazing how fundamental that is. So even a 3-day-old infant, experiences feelings of shame. That's incredible.
Interestingly, it's very much tied to agency, especially at that age. So there's what Silvan Tompkins calls competency pleasure, which is a really important concept, which is the idea that we get a certain pride out of doing things, out of learning something, out of making podcast work by hitting the record button. Seriously.
That's a win. Yeah, little things.
It's a win.
Yeah.
You know, that, hey, guess what? We made this happen.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful feeling. Having that sort of competency is a type of energy. It's a type of pride. The opposite of that is shame. If afterwards, you know, this didn't happen and I kept screwing it up and we had to say like, yeah, it didn't work today, I'd been like slumping around going like, you know, this sucks, man. And depending on my relationship with myself, and I don't have the type of relationship with myself that I'm going to talk about right now, but many people would say like, look at that. That's another thing that I did in which I didn't accomplish. Like I tried, but I didn't succeed. What does it say about me?
Sure.
You and I, fortunately, don't allow that to happen. You know, you said
sometimes.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I try not to go there. I mean, yes, it has happened in the past and could possibly happen in the future. But a healthy way of dealing with shame or disappointment is to have people around you that say, "Hey, let's try this again. I know we can do it.
Yes.
Let's get back on."
Yes, absolutely.
And so it takes a community of people to deal with shame.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. And when I talk to other, fathers, I have a 2-year-old. I find myself quite often engaging in behavior where I put shame on my son, and it's completely automatic. I've been potty training him all year, and I try very hard not to, even when I'm cognizant of it. But if he poops his pants, I'm definitely not happy with him, and I try very, very hard, not to make him feel badly about it. But he definitely experiences shame when I put that on him, and so it is something that even when you're trying not to, it happens in any kind of relationship. It's really interesting how that plays out.
What a horrible father!
And then I'm ashamed for myself, right, for behaving that way and not having more self-control. But you should see this kid's
that
poops.
poor kid, he was just 6 months old.
You should see this kid's poops. I mean, they're really large. They smell really. It's not my fault. It's just it's his fault.
If I'd seen him, I'd shame him too. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
So what do you say? Oh, you did that stinky naughty thing again. You cleaned it up this time.
That's right. How dare you? Yeah, exactly.
It's hilarious. Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because there's obviously, well, not obviously, but there is a positive place for shame. I mean, it instructs us as a society, as a culture. It instructs us as an individual within a society and culture about what's okay to do and what's not okay to do. Mm-hmm. If he's at the swimming pool and decides to pull his pants off or swimming suit off, you're probably going to let him know that that's not okay. And there's probably going to be a look on your face, is maybe as well as some words that say, you're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
We keep our clothes on.
Yeah.
That's why you're wearing a swimsuit.
Sure.
You put that back on, and I don't see that thing off ever again, except when we're at home.
Right.
Or, something like that. I somehow learned not to just take my clothes off at random, like at Kroger or, random places, in public.
Again, as a Florida man, it's still a learning process for me. I'm not quite there yet. I understand shirts and things are supposed to be worn sometimes. I don't necessarily know when, but it's okay.
It's a Florida thing.
It's a Florida thing.
We'll just rip their clothes off randomly. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good place.
One of many reasons I don't go down to Florida very often.
The weather's very nice. We can't help ourselves. Yeah.
The weather is nice. Yeah. The weather is very nice. Maybe that's why people want to, take their clothes off there. But you also, things, you learn really quickly how you're supposed to treat adults as a kid. Mm-hmm. What happens if you don't? Most of us in our families get shamed by parents. If you badmouth a parent, you can get not only a punishment, but public shaming for doing something that's disrespectful to a parent. At least it used to be.
Sure.
So, there's a place for it. You learn the rules of how society works. You don't high five the Pope, okay? And generally, if I had the occasion to high five, to meet the Pope, I'm not gonna. Hey, dude, what's up?
I don't know. I mean, have you seen the Pope Mobile? It's pretty cool. I might jump on that Pope Mobile and I'd get shot up? Though. That's the only. That's a physical risk. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think you're not going to get close enough to do that. But if he had the occasion,
honestly, Scott, I think he just gave me a goal in life. I'm going to high five the Pope. I'm going to make that happen. If I have to go to the Sistine Chapel, whatever it takes, I'm going to go high five.
I want to see that. I want that to be a goal for you.
Just like the scene in the Sistine Chapel where the two, right, the Botticelli painting where
Oh
they're
yeah,
touching.
yeah, yeah.
Instead, it's going to be the high five. You've just given me a goal for life. Thank you.
Oh, we need to make an NFT of that. We should create that.
Oh, that's got potential. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, let's create that and sell that.
Yeah.
That's going to be good money. Excuse me. There's a place for shame, but it needs to be recognized for what it is, because in relationships we do it to each other unintentionally. The fine line as a parent, having been a parent as well. Sorry, still am. Fortunately, my daughter is still alive, and so once a parent, you're always a parent. But having raised a child, you try to keep shame at a minimum, because it's very toxic in relationships. The diaper training, poopy diapers are just not fun. So you get over that. Then there's other things that he's going to do, and he's going to annoy the hell out of you, and you're going to be in public, and you're going to go like, "That's not my kid. That's my wife's kid."
That is your son. That's right.
That's your son. I have nothing to do with him. He's only mine when he's behaving.
That's right. I knew you cuckolded me. That's right.
So he gets immediately disowned. No, that happens. Every parent, feels a certain amount of shame when their kid misbehaves. At Target, just has this meltdown in front of everybody, and you're going, "Do you know how this makes me look? This makes me look really bad. Stop that behavior, because you're making me look bad."
Sure.
Even if you don't say it, it's kind of hard to not have that look on your face.
And then smart kids know how to use that and say, "Oh, Dad's ashamed. I'll bet if I do this every time, he'll buy that toy for me so that I stop behaving this way."
Don't give into it.
Yeah.
Dustin, don't give into it.
It's tough.
Deal with your shame. That's why we're doing this podcast, so you can learn too.
Exactly. This is for my bank account, so I don't buy a $30 toy.
Yeah,
every time
this is going to save you money.
Yeah.
This is going to save you money. This will save
exactly.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
But yeah, kids and shame. Yeah, parenting and shame. That'd be a podcast right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interestingly, this is a fascinating thing for me, is that one reason I started this whole project about meaningful happiness in the relationship workshops is because about 15 years ago, I was realizing, I had one of those eureka sort of moments, not real profound, but it was profound enough for me to realize, in the 12 years of education that we're required to get, there's generally not a single class on relationships, but everybody's going to tell you that relationships are the most important thing ever.
Yeah.
But we don't teach a course on it. We don't teach a course on parenting either. But nowadays, with podcasts, there's great podcasts on parenting. There's great podcasts on relationships and so forth.
This one's really good.
What does it say? It says
the present
Scott
fathers.
Conkright show. Sorry. I'll send you one of those to lift up next time.
Very nice. Please.
My name on it. Meaningful happiness one. No, he's got Dustin here. Has his buddies doing a what's it called, Dustin?
It's called the Present Fathers Podcast.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you do really beautiful, complex humor as well, right?
No, it's the most lowbrow.
They do a series of dad jokes.
Yeah, if you're not mostly Neanderthal, you're not going to find it funny.
The one you sent me yesterday was like, oh, I'm glad there's emoji for that, because there were no words for it. Like, oh lordy. But where were we? No, I was just saying that you don't get a class on it. In relationships, so there's, interestingly, that got me saying, like, I need to teach a course on how relationships work. And that's how my whole project started. And then I started really getting into affect theory and realizing that I wanted my money back from my doctorate degree, because they didn't teach this stuff about affect, which they should have taught me. Why do people come into therapy?
Generally because of how they feel. I can't imagine you often get someone who thinks in a certain way and wants to change that.
It's popular right now for people to say my brain wiring is bad or my brain
Sure.
chemistry is bad.
Okay.
They'll have all sorts of reasons that they'll use for that. I need to change the way I think, which we're basically saying I want to feel differently. People come into therapy. I've never had a single patient come into my office saying, you know what, Scott, I'm really worried because I'm like really content and happy right now, and my life is so meaningful. Something's got to be screwed up. Help me out with this.
Yeah.
That is not yet to happen. It'd be kind of cool to get paid good money to have somebody that's really delightfully happy coming in, just wanting to talk about it. They mostly come in because something's hurting. And 9 times out of 10, it has to do with something in their relationship with either somebody else or their relationship with themselves. Okay, so my idea is to help change people's relationship with themselves, which will then change their relationship with other people, change their relationship towards other people and with other people. And lastly, around it, the thing that's really gotten my interest is that so much of depression and anxiety is shame-based. So
and even being depressed and anxious is a shameful, you don't want to talk about it. So that's interesting in itself. Yeah.
Right. So most people, when they're initially feeling depressed or anxious, have shame around that. If it isn't actually caused by shame itself. But one of the fascinating things is that in most families, especially United States, Asian cultures, I think, are even stronger in this about feeling shame of your own shame. You learn to, like, if you feel shame, you're ashamed of feeling the shame.
Yeah.
And so you try to turn it into anything except shame. Like anxiety, you turn it into depression, you turn it into anger, and you do all the things that people do when they're ashamed. They hide. The first thing you do, like, if you feel ashamed, shame hides in the dark, as they say.
Yeah.
So the withdrawal behaviors, avoidance behaviors, attacking the self or attacking others are all reactions to shame. And so I see that in my practice, and now that I'm seeing it and naming it as shame, my patients are, immediately perk up and they say, wow, you're right. I said, probably even coming here to therapy, there's probably some shame in that. Who else has to pay money to talk about how you're being a failure in life with yourself and with others? Think about couples coming in to see me. Their relationship isn't working and they need help. That's generally shame-based. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of people don't think of that. So trying to keep shame at a minimum as a parent is probably the best thing you'll be able to do, except for the diaper issue.
Yeah.
That's okay. I got it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's something that really needs to be studied, learned, and it's unavoidable to shame oneself and others. It's just going to happen. If I disappoint you, if I have to cancel something, or we have another podcast set up and I say I can't do it right now, and you may have been really looking forward to it, be like, bummer. That bummer is a shame. I need to say, hey, Dustin, I need to be responsible for the fact that I induced a situation in which you possibly are feeling shame or disappointment. Hey, guess what, Dustin? I can't do it today, but I really want to do it. So let's go ahead and schedule it for tomorrow. And that's going to help reduce your mild shame, your disappointment.
Yeah.
So in any relationship, if you're canceling on somebody, you need to let them know that you're really interested in being with them. So, and that's an easy thing to do. But if you don't, you're going to let them wallow in a possibility of a fantasy that this other person doesn't want to be with you. And that happens in relationships all the time.
Yeah, I could see rejection being a huge source of shame.
Rejection is that's why dating is so hard. The phone apps are horrible for one's self-esteem because it's mild, continual rejection.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think I mentioned competency pleasure in this just a few minutes ago, or did I not?
Agency and company pleasure with the infant.
Yes, I
Yep.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, because we're repeating some of the things we said before. And I couldn't remember if I brought that up.
Yeah.
This thing does not provide competency pleasure. Scrolling at social media does not. If you make a TikTok video, that's a potential competency pleasure.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, because it's passive. So, and
It's totally passive.
and I think the numbers are something like 5% of social media is creators, and the other 95% are totally passive and
Consumers.
and consumers.
Yeah,
Exactly.
consuming.
Which means 95% of us are not receiving competency pleasure from using these devices.
But if you want your kid to have competency pleasure, which you do, or if I want to get competency pleasure, I don't go to social media. I go learn something. I mean, getting on the computer and learning a new language or something like that, that's a great use of the internet as a tool.
Yeah.
Learning social media as a tool to learn stuff
Mm-hmm.
is great. If it's, there's only so many funny cat singing songs and cars crashing off of cliffs and things like that I can watch that are useful. I mean, they're fun. I mean, I get caught up in every once in a while the sort of passive silliness that you can see on social media. But after a while, you're not getting much from it, except avoiding going and doing something that could give you pleasure.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely an issue.
Pleasure. So you have to go outdoors. You have to go outside. You have to go do something. Like when parenting, Aria, we didn't allow TV. I mean, we had a TV set. It was always family time. Then it was always like a kid show. But the computer was only for homework. She also went to Waldorf school. So they, as a general rule, don't allow social media or computers and all that in the house. Or they ask that you not. But by the time she was 13, there was a time that she wanted to watch I forget what show. It was a teenage girl show. I think, and I watched it with her. On the second week, we got halfway through it. She goes, "You know what? Can we go out inside and play?"
Wow. Yeah.
I went, "Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Right."
And if you don't know that going out and playing, or having a dad or parent to do that with, if you don't have that, you're not going to ask for it.
Of course, right. You wouldn't know any better.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, the outside is a very scary place. And the way that we think of it, as when we were growing up is quite different from, I think, how a lot of kids look at it today. And that's an interesting change we've seen in society.
I think you're referencing Jonathan Haidt there. Is that?
Yeah, he talks a lot about that in The Coddling of the American Mind. It's an interesting, kind of look at, so for example, I think we had this conversation before, as an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, for you or I to go to the store and buy some eggs would not have been a big deal when we were growing up. And I think if I were to have an 8-year-old and send him to a store to go buy things for me, I would be reported for child abuse. It's just changed so much as to, what is allowed and what is not, for children. And that has delayed their development and led to a lot of interesting, kind of changes in how they look at themselves. A loss of competency pleasure, right? I mean, it felt good to go to the store and buy some bananas for my mom. And, I can't send my kid out to do that anymore. And that is a shame.
But he's at work, right?
Of course, yeah. He's in the mines scratching away for coal right now.
How old is he right now?
He's 2.
He's 2. Okay,
but that's
right,
the nice
right.
thing. So 2-year-olds have clever small hands that can weave into crevices that larger hands cannot.
There you go.
So,
so you're earning a lot of money from his labor.
Yeah,
that's great.
Exactly.
That's smart.
It's a great source of competency pleasure for me.
I like that. Yeah, but just don't have him. Don't make it public. Don't have him go to the store for you.
No, of course not.
Isn't it a mine?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. His little lungs will be okay.
We could laugh, but I think I told you a couple of years ago I went up to Dahlonega, to the gold mines up there.
Yeah.
Where you can go down and do a tour, and they had 8, 9, 10-year-olds working 10-hour days.
Oh wow! Even then.
Interesting.
Okay.
And that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm kidding. I mean, that was actually what was they? Turn of the century, something like that. up till 1920 or something.
That's so funny. I think of turn of the century as 1900s, but you're right. 2000 is the turn of the century. So yeah, 20 years ago.
Well, I was thinking 1900s.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I guess we've had another turn of the century since then.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It gets so complicated.
I know.
You know, I'm now ashamed. It's like, oh, there's 2 centuries there. That,
yeah.
But good. You know, this is a good beginning around shame.
Absolutely.
It's a happy topic, right? I mean, like this is the problem with shame is that nobody really wants to talk about it. So that we're laughing and having a good time talking about it is showing that you can have a good time talking about shame.
Of course. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Always enjoy our conversation.
So next time we're going to talk about all the things you're ashamed of, and we're going to laugh about it.
Perfect. Okay. Ideally, if we can get some attractive young women to be laughing at me while that's occurring, that would really that would help.
Oh, so I didn't know that's one of your things.
That's right.
We can make that happen. I'm sure there's a website for that. I'll look into it. Thank you, Dustin.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate it.